Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, November the 18th, 2025, and today I will talk a bit about how compost mulch acts differently in different regions, a potentially new way to nonprofit, and getting good brassica heads in hotter climates. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday is brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil, and it's officially their pre-sale season for 2026. So check that out at tilthsoil.com/farmers to get a pretty sweet deal on potting mix for next season. Link will be in the show notes. All right, well, how is everyone's week going so far? We are in the middle of November here. I was going to say here, but I think November's pretty much everywhere. At least here, there's not a ton going on in the farm. We will be harvesting today, but other than that, we survived those hard frosts that came in last week with more or less flying colors and no flying row covers or tarps. So that was good. I'm still recovering, as you could probably hear in my voice, from the trip down to South Carolina for the CFSA Sustainable Ag Conference, and that will at very least accentuate some of what I talk about over the next little while, including both the first and third segments today. But I can feel the lack of break I got this week a little bit in my bones. In a good way, though. I feel tired and satisfied somewhat all at the same time. Anyway, one of the things that I heard this week that I think is important to discuss and emphasize was in the talk that Noah from Wild East Farm gave, who you will hear more from soon, and with whom we did a video a couple years back that we will link in the show notes. Anyway, he was talking about compost mulching and how much different that is for him in hot, humid North Carolina, where he is, than, say, Europe, where a lot of the proponents of deep compost mulching, no dig systems live. A big reason for that being, well, a few things. First off, is decomposition. Compost just does not last there in the hot, humid South like it does in, say, England or much of Europe, where the no dig systems are popular. And a big part of that is simply the length of season coupled with the heat and humidity where Noah is in North Carolina, but also, in fact, where I am here in Kentucky. As Noah pointed out in his talk that day, a thick layer of compost does not stay a thick layer of compost here as it might in a cooler climate. A year and a half after we layer compost on beds, it's all but gone. Moisture is a key factor in decomposition, as are things like heat, but also soil type and soil health, as healthier soils, richer in microbial life, will decompose certain materials faster. To that point, on the decomposition side, microbes require moisture and some amount of heat to decompose compost, some of which, of course, becomes soil organic matter and nutrients for plants, and some escapes as CO2 breathed out by the microbes. So that is part of the disappearing act. Just simple, basic biological decomposition. The other part is movement. When you have a longer season, you grow more crops, and with more crops comes more movement of the compost itself, like physical movement as you plant, as you cultivate, and then as you harvest. Then, of course, you have rain, which will wash some, hopefully a small amount, of the compost into the pathways, plus wind that will blow the lighter particles down the ridge of the beds and into the paths as well. So even in a world where you start with 6 to 8 inches of compost as mulch, the results in warmer regions will be significantly less than that by the end of that season. There is also the challenge of heat with the compost mulch. In hotter climates, black mulches just tend to be hotter. Now, the native soil surface below the mulch will be fine and mostly cool for sure, plus nicely moist, just because, that's how mulch rolls. But the compost itself, where many plants will be growing, can get quite hot in the sun, which can burn up the plant roots, especially for more sensitive crops. So although that can be a huge boon in the spring and fall, it can complicate what you can grow in that system in the middle of the summer, which ultimately just means maybe you use a lightly colored mulch or even a quick cover crop to help cool that surface down a little bit. Even something like a little bit of buckwheat can help. Anyway, those are just some of the contextual things to think about when it comes to compost mulching, because if your compost decomposes more rapidly, that will change your expenses quite a lot and make you have to math that out, not just how much compost you're using, but also what you're growing in that compost. Like I often say, in terms of like running a business at least, you can't really justify sweet corn and deep compost mulch for the cost to expense ratio is not great. But that's especially true if the compost just does not stick around. Like if you have to refresh those beds more often and at a greater level, that's just a greater expense. Anyway, what say you all? What have been your experiences with this? Let us know, and otherwise we're going to take a quick break. Next up, getting brassicas to head in warmer climates. Be right back. Brassica. Yep. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Astrid Cook, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I have a question about growing heading brassicas in a warm climate. Of course, now that I've already planted them all out. I live in Piedmont, North Carolina, Zone 8A. I've been gardening for 5 years and have hardly ever managed to successfully get a heading broccoli, cauliflower, or cabbage to size up well without bolting in the autumn. I certainly haven't had any success with Brussels sprouts. We have temps in the 90s until late September. Then our Persephone period starts early November and first frost is mid-late November. I have asked my fellow master gardeners and a couple growers at our farmers market. Many are too busy serving customers to ask random growing questions. That's appreciated that you recognize that. To be honest, sometimes people don't. Anyway, back to their question. And haven't gotten a decisive answer. Last year, I overwintered PSB and Calabrese. PSB did way better, which made the spring bolting work for me, and I have harvested that until June. This year, I've added sprouting cauliflower. Is this my fate? Am I overlooking a way to succeed in growing conventional, quote-unquote, brassicas? P.S. Thanks for spreading the good word. We can use all the help we can get out here in the most rapidly developing city in the country. And from my husband, thanks for being the most based podcast out there, Astrid, end quote. All right, so thank you. And I had to sit on this question for a little bit because I feel like it was that day or like maybe the day before that I'd done another segment on brassicas similar to this. So apologies, Astrid, and shouts to being based. That meant something very different when I was growing up. So big ups to the word based for bucking that image. Good stuff. And I think I'm supposed to take it as a compliment. So shouts. So to your question/topic here, I assume that when you say that your heads of broccoli and cauliflower are bolting before they size up, you basically just mean they are giving you like tiny heads that are never getting very big before they fully just like go to flower. Now that can be a number of things that cause that. One, if you plant them too early and they go through a frost really early on in their life, that can cause them to do what we call buttoning up and give you like tiny heads that do go to flower before ever really like giving you an actual head. Also, fertility can be a big factor there. And some growers will give them a nice burst of organic nitrogen like fish hydrolysate, typically through their fertigation system right before they start to flower or head up. Ditto the cabbage, really. It's kind of the same thing. Now, in warmer regions, these are always going to be relatively hard crops to grow only because the preference of heading brassicas is generally cool nights, drier air. In your region and mine, throughout the summer, it's mostly just hot, humid nights, which will limit their production a bit. It's not impossible to grow nice heads during the season in these climates, but you may have to just trial different varieties, which it sounds like you are, so that's good. Now, Patreon member Mark Ellenbogen had written on there on that thread that you posted at patreon.com about getting them into the field in the early spring, and that would be my suggestion as well. Mid-March for you is probably possible, though I would suggest covering them for frost through that period because of the buttoning up thing, but that will help you get some nice early full heads, hopefully. Then for the fall, start those plants relatively early, especially things like Brussels. Those are a fall crop and will really only do well in the fall. So start them in June and then get them in the ground in July, potentially under some shade cloth to ease them into the heat. That should get them the length of the season that they prefer. Pests will be a challenge for the fall production, but that's just the nature of trying to grow these Mediterranean crops in the hot, humid South. Then, of course, you could keep trialing different overwintering options, and absolutely it is worth emphasizing sprouting broccoli in the overwinter spot. That is a really good option for us. Heading broccoli and cauliflowers may be tough in these warmer regions, but those sprouting broccolini types often really love our climates. Anyway, I hope there was something helpful in there. Wishing you the best of luck on your brassica adventure. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, a twist on an old classic, the nonprofit. Sounds like a cocktail. Could be a cocktail. Be right back.
Oh. Whew. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 47 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all one word, 26NOTILL, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Marble Seed. The Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference attracts a wide range of regenerative and organic farmers for 3 days of skill development and community building. Farmer Drew Kramer said, "Going to Marble Seed was so invigorating at a time when I needed it most. I picked up tools I'm already using." The conference is the final week in February in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Early registration opens December 4th at conference.marbleseed.org. That's conference.marbleseed.org. All right, back to the show.
All right, so the CFSA conference this weekend, Hannah and I attended, had a great talk on nonprofits. And first off, I have to say the vibe in South Carolina is among my favorites, as we met some of the most interesting and most thoughtful humans, both in this particular talk, but also just like the entire time we were there. Kentucky is a nice place. Like, people are really nice here, but the South Carolina, like, somehow just completely puts us to shame. Anyway, there was a lot of discussion about entrepreneurship and nonprofits. In other words, should someone start a business or a nonprofit instead? And one thing that came to mind as I was listening to all the great commentary on this was No-Till Growers, this company, which of course is conveniently always on my mind. What No-Till Growers did as an organization was start as a for-profit business with a nonprofit model. Basically, the idea was we were going to give away our information for free and look for various funding options, including small donors, advertising, and books and hat sales to basically fund it. And frankly, we never even knew if we'd need to be a nonprofit, but that was sort of the idea. We dabbled in some events as well. We tried a handful of various, funding mechanisms. We got some small grants. Then later, once we were established, we officially transitioned to being a full-on nonprofit, which we are now. Now, to be clear, this isn't a novel idea entirely, and we were far from the first organization to transition from for-profit to nonprofit. But the relevance here is that so often, it seems, confirmed several times in the conversation that was had during the particular talk that we were attending, was that funding can be really difficult for nonprofits. And a big part of that, I believe, is that nonprofits start with a great mission, feeding a community, say, or in No-Till Growers' case, education, or whatever it may be, with grants and donations as the primary avenue for funding. Whereas I think one place No-Till Growers actually did something right is we started as a for-profit business that had to make revenue in other ways before transitioning to a nonprofit where we could have greater access to grant funding and larger donations and those sorts of things. In other words, we weren't relying on those funding avenues, which can be notoriously tricky when we transition from for-profit to nonprofit. We already had some, baseline funding mechanisms. So any donations or grants we received after transitioning were effectively not critical funding, but instead could provide a path to larger resources that could help us grow without us stressing about whether or not we were going to get this or that grant to just even survive. To us, any grants or larger donations are revenue that we can put towards growth. Survival is already taken care of. Like, we're good. The other side of that coin is that by starting it as a for-profit business, we were able to rapidly establish ourselves without having to go through a board for every, basic decision. We have a board now, and in fact, we're trying to grow that board, so be on the lookout for info about how to join us, Patreon members, and work with me to grow this thing. But the model has already been established and proven, so the board's job is less about making basic decisions as to what we are and what we're doing, and more about making decisions about growth and reaching and helping more growers. Anyway, that got me thinking about this as like a model, as an approach to starting a nonprofit. What I mean is that if someone is wanting to start a nonprofit, maybe they consider starting as a for-profit first, establishing the funding mechanisms that aren't large donations and certain grants, though there are also grants available for for-profits, just not as many, not as big, a little bit harder to get sometimes. And then once you've done that, later transitioning to be a nonprofit entity. Now, I will say if we had known for sure that that was the plan for no-till growers, we weren't always convinced we needed to be a nonprofit, for instance, and instead we were just going to continue operating as a for-profit that acted as a nonprofit for as long as we could. But anyway, had we known for sure that that's what we wanted to do, we probably would have sat down with a nonprofit lawyer from the very beginning to make sure that we were putting all of our ducks in a row to make the transition simpler. Not having a board in the beginning is a value, but also building those additional revenue streams makes our organization so much more sustainable now than it would have been if we'd just straight up went for a nonprofit status from the beginning. Anyway, I am not a nonprofit expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know funding is a big hang up for nonprofits. And to me, this is a way to possibly address that. If you have this idea, something cool to do, and you have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit and that desire to help people all at the same time, essentially taking nonprofit ideas and creating for-profit businesses that can be later converted to a legal nonprofit entity. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole thought. Let me know what you all think. Otherwise, we're going to call it a Tilth Tuesday, and we will have a fun treat for you all tomorrow. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, just like I discussed. So donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Again, that helps us to grow what we do. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, don't forget your 20-second farm video clips. Send those to farmermike at no-tillgrowers.com. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of November, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Thomas. Thomas is a new earthworm. Shouts, Thomas. All right, so in this week's story, you will remember there was a little snafu in the communication between Rod and Rebecca yesterday, where Rod was hoping Rebecca would meet him for dinner at Le Chat Noir, but Rebecca heard Chateau Benoir, which is perhaps the opposite of a date night restaurant. It's a hotel on the edge of town. So anyway, Rebecca shows up to this old rundown hotel, and it's, well, exactly what it sounds like. So she tries to call Rod on her phone, but is getting, poor reception. It's like that all over town, thus the miscommunication to begin with. And anyway, Rebecca decides to just go in and ask the attendant in the office if there's a restaurant here, like maybe it's like a speakeasy thing. She doesn't know. So she goes into the office, but no one is there. So she spies the little bell, the little bell you ring on the desk, and decides to give it a ring. And when she does, she hears a loud groan from the back, but not like a human groan. She hears like a loud groan from possibly an animal. And that is for tomorrow on the Chateau No. Yeah, I tried. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.